My name is Elena Cross. I didn't inherit wealth. I inherited a house and a war I never asked for. The house was left to me by my grandfather, a man who believed ownership meant responsibility, not control. I paid the taxes, I fixed the roof, I lived quietly. I thought that was enough. I was wrong. It was 6 a.m. on a quiet Tuesday morning, and I was standing in my kitchen in my pajamas, half asleep, waiting for the coffee maker to finish brewing. The house was still dark except for the soft glow under the cabinets. This place had been mine, truly mine, since my grandfather Arthur passed and left it to me in his will. No mortgage drama, no roommates, just me and the quiet I'd earned after years of putting up with my parents' control games. Then came the pounding. Not a polite knock. Heavy, insistent fists on the front door. The kind that says official business before you even see who's there. My heart slammed into my ribs. I set the mug down, walked over, and cracked the door just enough to peek out. A uniformed deputy stood on my porch. Deputy Alvarez, according to the name tag. Behind him, the sky was barely turning pink. He held up a stack of papers like it was a warrant for my soul. Elena Cross? His voice was flat, professional, the way cops sound when they've done this 100 times. Yeah, that's me. I'm here to serve you with a notice of eviction. You've got until noon today to vacate the premises or we'll be back to remove you and your belongings. I stared at the papers he was extending toward me. Eviction? From my own house? The one Grandpa deeded to me outright? My brain short-circuited for a second. There's been a mistake. This is my house. I own it. I've got the deed, the will, everything. He didn't blink. That's what they all say, ma'am. Just read the documents. You can contest it in court if you want, but right now, this is the order. I took the papers with shaking hands. The top sheet screamed in bold, writ of possession / notice to vacate. My name listed as tenant. My parents, Robert and Margaret Cross, as the plaintiffs / landlords. It felt like the ground dropped out from under me. Who does that at 6 a.m.? Who sends a sheriff to bang on your door before the sun's even up, when the whole neighborhood is still asleep? It's designed to catch you off guard, half-dressed, defenseless, so you panic and comply. I closed the door, locked it, and leaned against it, breathing hard. The coffee was burning now, I could smell it, but I didn't care. I walked to the living room window and pulled the curtain back just an inch. There they were. Across the street, under the streetlight that hadn't turned off yet, stood my mom and dad. Mom had her arms crossed, head tilted like she was watching a mildly interesting show. Dad was checking his watch. They weren't even trying to hide. They were waiting to see me dragged out, waiting for their plan to work. My own parents had orchestrated this. The people who raised me, who used to tuck me in, had just sent the sheriff to throw me out of the home Grandpa wanted me to have. Shock hit first, ice cold, then betrayal, sharp enough to make my eyes burn. But right behind it came something else. Clarity. Razor sharp. This wasn't random. This was calculated. And if they thought I was going to cry and pack a bag, they were about to learn how wrong they were. I grabbed my phone and started recording. Every page of that eviction notice, every detail. Because if this was war, I wasn't going down without evidence. No one expects to be evicted from their own house at dawn. But that morning, that knock changed everything. And I was just getting started. I stood there with my back against the locked front door, the eviction papers still clutched in my hand like they were burning me. My pulse was hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. The deputy had already walked back to his cruiser, lights off, no sirens, just gone. The street was dead quiet again, like nothing had happened. But something had. Something massive. I forced myself to move, one foot in front of the other. As across the hardwood floor, Grandpa had refinished himself when I was 10. I reached the living room window, the big bay one that looks out over the front yard and the quiet suburban street, and I pulled the sheer curtain back, just enough to see without being obvious. There they were. Across the street, under the fading orange glow of the street lamp, stood my mother and father. Robert and Margaret Cross, my own parents. Dad was leaning against their black SUV, arms folded tight across his chest, face blank like he was waiting for a bus. Mom stood next to him, one hand pressed to her cheek, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. She was crying. Or pretending to. I'd seen that exact performance before. Every time she wanted sympathy from a neighbor, a teacher, a family friend. The delicate sniffle, the trembling lip. Theater. They weren't hiding. They weren't even trying to look casual. They were watching, waiting. Like this was some kind of show, and I was the main act about to get booed off stage. My stomach twisted so hard I almost dropped the phone I was still holding. For maybe 5 seconds, 5 long, frozen seconds, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The betrayal hit like a slap I never saw coming. These were the people who used to read me bedtime stories, who took me to soccer practice, who told me family was everything. And now they were standing there calmly, waiting to watch a sheriff drag me out of the only home I'd ever really felt safe in. Then the numbness cracked. Something colder and clearer took its place. This wasn't the system screwing me over. This wasn't a clerical error or some faceless bureaucracy. This was them. My own mother and father had filed the paperwork. They'd paid the fees. They'd arranged for the 6 a.m. knock because they knew I'd be disoriented, half asleep, easy to intimidate. They wanted me gone. They wanted the house Grandpa left me, probably because the market value had tripled since he bought it in the 80s, or because they'd burned through their savings on bad investments and now saw my inheritance as their backup plan. I let the curtain fall back into place. My hands weren't shaking anymore. This wasn't just unfair. This was war, and wars aren't won by crying in the living room. I walked to the kitchen table, spread the eviction papers out under the overhead light, and started reading every single line. Slowly, carefully. The more I read, the worse it got. Right at the top, plaintiffs, Robert Cross and Margaret Cross. Defendant/tenant, Elena Cross. Property, 1427 Maple Lane, my address. Basis, unlawful detainer, tenant failing to vacate after notice. Tenant, I own this house, free and clear. No mortgage, no lease. Grandpa Arthur Cross's will was crystal clear. The property passes directly to me upon his death. No strings, no trusts controlled by my parents. I have the recorded deed with my name on it. I have the probate court order from 2 years ago. I pay the property taxes. I've got the utility bills in my name, but according to this eviction notice, I'm just a renter. A month-to-month tenant who somehow failed to pay rent and now has to be removed. I flipped to the attached complaint for unlawful detainer. There it was in black and white, my parents claiming they are the legal owners and that I'm occupying the property without permission. It was so absurd it almost made me laugh. Except nothing about this was funny. Paperwork can lie. Paperwork can be twisted, forged, or manipulated until black becomes white and ownership becomes tenancy. And that's exactly what they were trying to do. Rewrite reality on official letterhead so they could steal what was mine. I sat back in the chair, staring at the pages. The coffee maker had long since clicked off. The kitchen smelled faintly burnt. They thought I'd panic, pack a suitcase, call them crying, beg. Instead, I opened my phone's camera app again. I photographed every single page, close-ups of the signatures, the case number, the court stamp, the fake landlord names. Then I pulled up my cloud drive and started downloading copies of Grandpa's will, the deed, the death certificate, everything I'd scanned and backed up years ago just in case. Because if they wanted to play dirty with documents, I was going to bury them in real ones. They weren't the only ones who could read fine print, and I wasn't leaving my house without a fight. I kept staring at the eviction papers on the kitchen table, the words blurring a little as the adrenaline started to fade into cold focus. The clock on the microwave read 6:47 a.m. I had maybe 5 hours before noon hit, and the sheriff could come back with backup to physically remove me. I flipped to the back pages, the proof of service section. That's where they prove the papers were properly delivered to me so the clock could start ticking on my response time. And there it was. Service address, 478 Oakwood Drive, apartment 3B. That was my parents' old condo, the one they lived in until last year when they moved to the suburbs, the place I haven't set foot in since I was 19 and left for good. Method of service, substituted service on adult female occupant. Person served, adult female occupant, refused to give name. Date and time, yesterday 7:15 p.m., signature of recipient, a scribbled signature that looked suspiciously like my mother's loopy M and flourish on the tail. They hadn't even bothered to fake a different handwriting. Mom had signed for the papers herself, at their old address, claiming to be some random adult female occupant who accepted on my behalf. I almost laughed out loud, bitter and sharp. In California, a substituted service is allowed if they can't find you after reasonable attempts at personal service, but only at your actual residence or workplace, not at some random old address your parents used to live at, and definitely not with the occupant being the plaintiff herself. This wasn't sloppy paperwork. This was deliberate fraud. They listed a fake address so I'd never get the actual summons and complaint in time. No notice means no chance to file an answer in court. Default judgment. Eviction granted without me ever knowing the case existed until the sheriff showed up at dawn. They tried to rig the entire process so I'd lose by default. Quietly, legally, irreversibly. My hands were steady now. The shock had burned off. What was left was pure, icy calculation. I grabbed my laptop. I logged into my county court's online portal. Thank God Grandpa taught me to keep digital copies of everything, and pulled up the case number from the eviction notice. Sure enough, unlawful detainer filed 2 weeks ago, proof of service filed last week, default requested and granted because defendant failed to respond. They'd counted on me being clueless, counted on the system moving fast enough that by the time I figured it out, I'd already be on the street. But I wasn't clueless, and I wasn't going anywhere. Noon. That was the hard deadline stamped on the writ. If premises not vacated by 12 p.m. today, law enforcement will execute removal. I didn't scream at the papers. I didn't call my parents to yell. I didn't waste energy on drama. Instead, I pulled out my phone, hit record on the video camera, and started narrating calmly, like I was documenting evidence for a future court exhibit. Hi, this is Elena Cross at 1427 Maple Lane. It's currently 7:15 a.m. on today's date. I've just been served with an eviction notice by Deputy Alvarez. I'm the legal owner of this property per the deed recorded date and my grandfather's probated will. This eviction is fraudulent. The proof of service lists an incorrect address, my parents' former residence, and the recipient's signature matches my mother's handwriting. I'm now going to photograph every page in sequence. I laid each sheet flat under good light, zoomed in on signatures, dates, addresses. I narrated what I saw. Exhibit A, incorrect service address. Exhibit B, forged or improper substituted service by plaintiff herself. I switched to voice memo for audio backup, repeating key details in case the video glitched. No arguing with the deputy earlier. He was just doing his job. No hysterics, just documentation. Silence when it counts, evidence when it matters. That's how you win when someone's trying to steamroll you with lies. I uploaded everything to a secure cloud folder labeled Eviction Fraud Evidence, Do Not Delete. Shared it with my best friend as a witness, and emailed copies to myself for timestamp proof. Then I looked at the clock. 8:02 a.m. I had to get to the courthouse, file an emergency ex parte motion for a stay of execution, something to freeze the eviction until a judge could hear the fraud claims. In my state, you can request a temporary stay if there's clear evidence of improper service or misconduct. It's not guaranteed, but with this paper trail, it was my best shot. I threw on jeans and a hoodie, grabbed my folder of originals, Grandpa's will, the deed, tax records, utility bills, and headed for the door. As I locked up, I glanced across the street. Mom and Dad's SUV was gone. They'd probably left thinking the job was done. They were wrong. The clock was ticking, yeah, but time wasn't their ally anymore. It was mine. I started the car, heart pounding but mind clear. This fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. I slammed the car door, tires squealing as I peeled out of the driveway. The courthouse was about 20 minutes away on a good day. Traffic in this part of town could turn that into 45 if the freeway gods were against me. It was pushing 8:30 a.m. now. Noon loomed like a guillotine. My mind raced faster than the car. I'd already pulled up the County Superior Court website on my phone at a red light. Unlawful detainer cases are handled in the Civil Division, and they have an ex parte calendar for emergencies like this. In California, you can file an ex parte application for a temporary stay of execution if there's evidence of fraud, improper service, or extreme hardship. The key word, ex parte, meaning without the other side getting full notice first, because time is literally everything. I hit the clerk's line on speaker while weaving through morning commuters. Superior Court Clerk's Office. How can I help? Hi, this is Elena Cross. I need to file an emergency ex parte application to stay a writ of possession in an unlawful detainer case. The execution is set for noon today. Can I get on the calendar this morning? The clerk was calm. A professional. We have openings at 10:30 and 11:15. You'll need to file the application, supporting declaration, and proposed order before the hearing. Bring proof of service on the plaintiffs if possible, but since it's ex parte and urgent, we can shorten time. I'm on my way. I'll be there in 20. I hung up, heart hammering. The NHIP-FIM was real. Every second felt like a ticking bomb. I cranked the AC to keep my head clear, blasted some fast-paced instrumental track on Spotify to match the adrenaline, and mentally rehearsed what I'd say. By 9:05, I was parking in the courthouse garage, papers stuffed in a folder. Grandpa's original probated will, with the specific bequest of the house to me, the recorded grant deed in my name only, property tax receipts for the last 3 years in my name, utility bills showing continuous residency since I was a kid, birth certificate tying me to the address, even old photos of me at family holidays in the backyard for good measure, plus every photo and video I'd taken of the eviction notice that morning. I sprinted up the steps, through security, and straight to the civil clerk's window. Ex parte for stay of execution, UD case number. I rattled it off. The clerk took my stack, stamped it, gave me a file number, and pointed me to the courtroom. Hearing at 10:30 in Department 12. Judge Whitman is on today. He's fair but moves fast. Be ready to explain why this is emergent. I found a bench outside the courtroom, sat, and started typing my declaration on my phone, swearing under penalty of perjury that the service was improper. Wrong address, plaintiff signed for it herself. The eviction was fraudulent, I was the legal owner, and immediate irreparable harm would occur if evicted. Loss of home, disruption to work, emotional distress, potential homelessness. I attached digital copies of everything. At 10:25, they called my case. I stood up, knees wobbly but voice steady. Your Honor, Elena Cross, representing myself. I'm requesting an emergency stay of the writ of possession set for noon today. The plaintiffs, my own parents, served papers at an old address I don't live at, signed for them themselves as a fake adult occupant, and obtained a default judgment without me ever receiving notice. Here's the proof of service showing the wrong address, and here's my deed and will proving ownership. This is fraud on the court. If the eviction proceeds, I'll lose my home illegally. Judge Whitman peered over his glasses at the papers, then at me. This is highly unusual. Parents evicting their own child from an inherited property and improper service? Yes, Your Honor. I have video evidence from this morning, too. He nodded slowly. I'm granting a temporary stay pending a full hearing on the merits. Writ stayed until further order. Plaintiffs to appear in 2 weeks for an OSC why the judgment shouldn't be set aside for fraud and lack of jurisdiction due to improper service. Clerk to prepare the order. Relief flooded me so hard I almost sat down right there. But I thanked him, gathered my things, and walked out shaking. The clock read 10:48 a.m. I'd beaten noon. Barely. Back home by 11:30. Doors locked, blinds down, and coffee finally cold. I logged back into the court portal to download the full case file. The stay gave me breathing room, but I needed to know exactly what lies they'd fed the court to get this far. There it was, attached to their original complaint, a residential lease agreement dated 2 years ago. Monthly rent, $1,500, term, month to month. Landlord, Robert and Margaret Cross, tenant, Elena Cross, and at the bottom, a signature that looked exactly like mine. Except it wasn't. I knew my own handwriting. This was close, too close, but off. The loop on the E was too round, the cross on the T too straight. I hadn't signed anything like this, ever. I'd never agreed to rent my own house from my parents. Why would I? Grandpa left it to me free and clear to protect me from exactly this kind of family drama. And they'd forged my signature on a fake lease to create a landlord-tenant relationship out of thin air. That turned a simple ownership dispute into an unlawful detainer eviction, faster, easier, and with stricter timelines for me to fight back. This wasn't just about kicking me out anymore. This was about laundering theft through the courts. Make it look legitimate on paper, get a judgment, take possession, sell the house, or refinance it behind my back. All while I was supposedly just a tenant who didn't pay rent. The crime had escalated from civil fraud to straight-up forgery. California Penal Code 470 stuff. If proven, that's a felony. Jail time possible. Restitution. The works. I printed the lease page, laid it next to an old check I'd signed last month, and photographed them side by side. The differences jumped out. My hands were rock steady now. They thought a fake signature would seal the deal. They were about to learn how one forged line could unravel everything they'd built. I emailed the comparison photos to my cloud backup, titled Evidence of Forgery Lease Agreement. Then I started drafting my opposition papers for the upcoming hearing. Game on. I sat in my living room that evening, laptop open on the coffee table, the temporary stay order from Judge Whitman printed and taped to the fridge like a trophy. The house was quiet again. Too quiet after the chaos of the day. I'd downloaded the full case file from the court portal earlier, every attachment, every exhibit my parents had submitted. I clicked through the documents one by one. The fake lease was bad enough, but then I hit the next attachment, a quitclaim deed. I recorded 2 weeks ago. My breath caught. There it was in black and white, a quitclaim deed dated last month with my name as grantor, transferring full title of 1427 Maple Lane to Robert Cross and Margaret Cross as grantees. My signature at the bottom, perfectly forged, notarized by Elaine Brooks, Notary Public, with her seal stamped right next to it. The acknowledgement certificate said I appeared in person, acknowledged it was my free act and deed. They hadn't just tried to evict me as a tenant. They'd gone nuclear, faked a voluntary transfer of ownership. If that deed stood, I'd have no claim left. The house Grandpa left me would legally belong to them. They could sell it, refinance it, do whatever they wanted. And because it was recorded, any title search would show them as owners. The room spun for a second. How the hell do you fight a notarized deed? Notaries are supposed to verify identity in person. They watch you sign. They check ID. That stamp is supposed to mean something. Proving forgery when a notary's already certified it? That felt impossible. My signature looked close enough to fool most people, maybe even a judge at first glance. Panic clawed up my throat, but I shoved it down. I zoomed in on the signature. Same issues as the lease. The E loop too perfect. The tail on the S too short. Forged, but the notary seal made it real on paper. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. This was the twist that could end everything. If they pulled this off, I'd be homeless and out my inheritance. No appeal, no takebacks. But something nagged at me. Notaries keep journals, detailed logs. California law requires them to record specifics for every act, especially for deeds affecting real property. Date, time, type of act, signer's signature in the journal, ID details, thumbprint even. If this quitclaim was faked without me there, the journal would show cracks. It had to. I printed the deed, highlighted the notary section, and added it to my growing evidence folder. Tomorrow, I'd subpoena that journal. Or better, get the judge to order it produced at the hearing. They'd gone too far. This wasn't just fraud anymore. This was felony-level forgery, deed fraud, maybe notary misconduct too, and I was going to use their own official paper trail to bury them. The OSC hearing, order to show, cause why the default judgment and eviction shouldn't be set aside, came 2 weeks later. I'd filed my motion to vacate based on improper service, fraud, and now the forged quitclaim. I attached everything: the wrong address proof of service, side-by-side signature comparisons, my alibis, work logs, timestamps, and a declaration swearing I never signed any quitclaim or lease. Courtroom 12 was packed with other cases, but Judge Whitman called mine first. He'd read my papers. I could tell by the stack on his bench. My parents were there with their lawyer, Attorney Cole Harding, looking smug in suits. Mom dabbed at her eyes again, playing the victim. Dad stared straight ahead, jaw tight. Judge Whitman didn't waste time. He flipped through the file, paused on the quitclaim deed, then looked up at me. "Ms. Cross, you allege forgery on multiple documents, including this recorded quitclaim, and improper service at a former address." "Yes, Your Honor. I never signed that deed. I have proof I was at work during the alleged notarization time, security camera footage from my office, and the signatures don't match my own." He turned to my parents' side. "Counsel, your client submitted this deed as evidence of ownership transfer. Explain." Harding stammered something about valid conveyance and notarized acknowledgement. The judge frowned deeper. "This smells wrong. A child claiming her parents forged a quitclaim to steal her inherited home? Serious allegations. And if true, criminal." He leaned forward. "I'm issuing an immediate stay on any further execution or transfer related to this property. No sales, no refinances, nothing until we sort this. Clerk, prepare the order freezing the title status quo." Then the hammer. "I'm ordering the notary, Elaine Brooks, to appear at the next hearing with her entire journal relevant to this deed. Bring the original, and I want proof of ID verification, thumbprint if taken. Everything required under Government Code 8206. My parents shifted. Mom's tissue stopped moving. Dad's face went pale. The judge looked right at me. "Ms. Cross, you've raised enough red flags for an evidentiary hearing. Bring your witnesses, your footage experts if needed. We'll get to the bottom of this." He banged the gavel. Hearing continued 2 weeks. Notary subpoenaed. Status quo maintained. I walked out of that courtroom lighter than I'd felt in weeks. The system wasn't blind. Judge Whitman had sniffed out the rot. For the first time, the law was tilting towards the truth, toward me. The continued hearing felt like Judgment Day. Courtroom fuller now, word had spread a little. My parents sat rigid. Their lawyer looked nervous. Elaine Brooks, the notary, was there too, a middle-aged woman in a plain blazer clutching a bound journal like it was radioactive. Judge Whitman got straight to it. "Ms. Brooks, approach with your journal. Open to the entry for the quitclaim deed, dated date on the deed." She flipped pages, found it. The judge had her read aloud. Date, time, 2:45 p.m., type, acknowledgement, instrument, quitclaim deed, signer, Elena Cross, ID, California driver's license number, fake number listed, fee, $15. He stopped her. "ID number. Does that match the actual DL number for Elena Cross?" I'd already submitted my real DL copy. The judge compared. No match. Completely different serial. Brooks swallowed. I relied on what was presented." Time, 2:45 p.m., the judge continued. "Ms. Cross, where were you?" I stood. "At my job, Your Honor. I have time-stamped security footage from the office lobby showing me entering at 1:30 p.m. and badge swipes logging me in until 5. I couldn't have been at a notary office 30 miles away." The judge nodded. "And the journal? Any thumbprint? For real property deeds, California requires a right thumbprint in the journal. Brooks hesitated. No thumbprint noted. No thumbprint, he repeated, and no notation that you personally witnessed the signer place it. Also no entry for satisfactory evidence details beyond the mismatched ID. He closed the journal gently. Paper doesn't lie, Ms. Brooks, but entries can expose lies. This journal shows no proper ID verification, no required thumbprint for a deed transfer, inconsistent time and location with the signer's alibi, and a mismatched ID number. The room went dead silent. The judge looked at my parents. This deed appears fraudulent on its face. The lease agreement previously submitted shares similar signature irregularities. He turned to Brooks. You'll explain this under oath at the next phase. And Ms. Cross, your motion to vacate the default and set aside the eviction is granted pending full evidentiary hearing. The quitclaim is provisionally voided as to record title until proven otherwise. Relief hit me like a wave. The physical evidence, the notary's own journal, had cracked their story wide open. Dates wrong, ID fake, no thumbprint, no real witnessing, gi kong noi doi. Paper doesn't lie. And theirs had just confessed everything. The fight wasn't over, but the tide had turned hard. They weren't stealing my home anymore. They were facing consequences. The courtroom felt smaller that day. Air thicker. Every sound amplified, the creak of wooden benches, the shuffle of papers, the low murmur of the bailiff. It was the evidentiary hearing Judge Whitman had set after the notary journal exposed the cracks. My parents sat at the counsel table with attorney Cole Harding, who now looked like he wished he'd never taken the case. Mom's hands were clasped so tight her knuckles were white. Dad stared at the floor like it owed him money. Judge Whitman had the notary, Elaine Brooks, on the stand. She'd been sworn in, journal already in evidence. The judge didn't ease into it. Ms. Brooks, he said, voice even but heavy. Your journal entry for the quitclaim deed shows no thumbprint, a mismatched ID number, and no notation that you verified the signer's identity in person beyond what was presented. You've testified that the signer appeared before you. Yet Ms. Cross has provided irrefutable evidence, security footage, time-stamped payroll records, that she was at her workplace 35 miles away during the exact window you logged. Brooks shifted in the chair. Her eyes darted to my parents, then back to the judge. I followed standard procedure, she started, voice thin. The judge leaned forward slightly. Standard procedure requires personal appearance for acknowledgments on deeds. It requires satisfactory evidence of identity. It requires the signer to acknowledge the document as their own free act. Did Elena Cross appear before you on date at 2:45 p.m.? Silence stretched. 5 seconds. 10. Brooks's shoulders slumped. She looked down at her hands. No, Your Honor. A collective inhale from the gallery. Mom made a small sound, like a gasp caught in her throat. The judge didn't raise his voice. Explain. Mr. and Mrs. Cross came to my office. They had the quitclaim already filled out and signed. They said their daughter was in a hurry, couldn't make it, but it was urgent. They asked me to just notarize it quickly, stamp and seal so they could record it. I knew it wasn't right, but they were insistent. They paid double the fee. I didn't witness her sign. I didn't check her ID in person. I just sealed it. The words landed like bricks. Mom's face drained of color. Dad's jaw clenched so hard I saw the muscle twitch. Their lawyer tried to object. Hearsay, lack of foundation. But Judge Whitman cut him off with a single raised hand. Ms. Brooks, you committed notary misconduct, potentially aiding and abetting forgery. That's a crime in this state. Brooks nodded, tears starting. I know. I'm sorry. The judge turned to my parents. Mr. and Mrs. Cross, you submitted this deed to the court as evidence of a voluntary transfer. You swore under penalty of perjury that it was valid. Your attorney presented it in support of your unlawful detainer action. Do either of you wish to respond under oath? Dead silence. Mom opened her mouth, closed it. Dad didn't move. The judge waited another beat, then spoke directly to me. Ms. Cross, the court finds clear and convincing evidence of fraud on the court, forgery of the quitclaim deed, a forgery of the lease agreement, improper service, and perjury in the original filings. The default judgment is vacated. The writ of possession is quashed. The eviction action is dismissed with prejudice. He paused, letting it sink in. Further, the quitclaim deed is declared null and void ab initio due to forgery. The recorder's office will be ordered to expunge it from the chain of title. The lease is likewise voided. Then the final blow. This matter is referred to the district attorney's office for investigation of felony forgery under Penal Code 470, fraud, filing false documents, and perjury. The clerk will transmit the full record, including today's transcript and the notary's admission. He looked at my parents one last time. You may leave, but understand, the criminal side is out of my hands now. They stood slowly. Mom was trembling. Dad helped her up, but his face was ashen. No eye contact, no apologies. They walked out past me without a word, like ghosts leaving a room they'd tried to burn down. I stayed seated until the courtroom emptied. Judge Whitman caught my eye before he left the bench. You did good, Ms. Cross. You fought with facts, not emotion. That's how justice holds. I nodded, throat too tight to speak. I drove home in silence. No music, just the hum of the engine and the weight lifting off my chest with every mile. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked the same. Same porch light, same roses Grandpa planted, but it felt different. Safe, mine, truly mine again. I changed the locks that afternoon, installed a Ring camera at the front door and one by the garage, blocked their numbers, changed my email passwords. They drew the line in concrete. The eviction was gone, the fake deed erased, the lease shredded, and the criminal referral. That was the system saying, loud and clear, you don't get to steal someone's home with lies and walk away clean. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like balance restored. Justice didn't come from a dramatic courtroom outburst or a last-minute confession on the stand. It came from one small, stubborn thing, a single line in a notary's journal that didn't match reality. Paper doesn't lie. And when the truth finally speaks through the smallest detail, the biggest lies collapse. I sat on the porch that evening with a cup of coffee, fresh this time, not burnt, and watched the sun go down over the neighborhood. For the first time in weeks, I breathed easy. They'd tried to take everything Grandpa left me. They lost. And I was still here. Home. The house was quiet again. Not the tense, waiting for the other shoe to drop quiet from those weeks of hell, but the real kind. Soft, ordinary mine. I changed the locks the same afternoon the case was dismissed. Hardware store run, deadbolts upgraded to grade 1, keys only in my pocket and one spare hidden in a magnetic box under the porch step. No spare for anyone else, ever. Next came the cameras. I installed 3, one Ring at the front door, one covering the driveway, one tucked under the eaves watching the back gate. Motion lights, too, bright enough to make anyone think twice before stepping onto the property uninvited. Setup took an hour. Testing took another. I watched the live feed on my phone from the kitchen table, coffee finally tasting like coffee instead of adrenaline. I blocked their numbers. Mom's first. Her voicemails had started the day after the hearing, tearful, rambling about family and misunderstandings. Dad's next. No messages, just silence, which somehow felt heavier. Social media, muted, unfollowed, stories hidden. Their email addresses bounced into a folder labeled Archive Do Not Open. Clean cut. No dramatic last words. Just gone. They never called again. Never showed up. Never sent a card, a text, an apology scrawled on the back of a grocery receipt. Nothing. It was like they'd evaporated from my life the moment the judge's gavel fell. At first, the silence stung. A little. The part of me that still remembered birthday cakes and Christmas mornings wanted some kind of acknowledgement, something to prove they knew what they'd done. But that part got smaller every day. Weeks turned into months. The roses Grandpa planted bloomed again that spring. I pruned them myself, gloves on, clippers sharp. The house smelled like fresh paint after I redid the hallway. Neutral gray, nothing flashy, just clean. I started hosting friends for dinner again, laughed louder, slept deeper. One evening I sat on the porch swing, the one Grandpa hung when I was 12, with a glass of iced tea and watched the neighborhood settle into dusk. Kids on bikes, a dog barking 2 houses down, normal life moving on. I thought about them then, not with anger anymore, not really with sadness either, just curiosity. What were they telling themselves? That I was the ungrateful one? That the house should have been theirs? That family means ownership, not love? Or maybe they weren't thinking about it at all. Maybe they'd moved on to the next scheme, the next grievance. I didn't know, and for the first time, I didn't need to. Because here's what I learned the hard way. Family isn't always the safe place they tell you it is. Sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones sharpening the knife. Blood doesn't guarantee loyalty. Trust has to be earned, rebuilt, or, when it's shattered beyond repair, released. I released them. Not out of hate, out of survival. I kept the house, kept the memories of Grandpa laughing in the kitchen, teaching me how to change a faucet washer, telling me stories about the war and how he bought this place with his first real paycheck. Those stayed. The rest? I let go. The camera light blinked softly as the sun dipped below the rooftops. A notification pinged. Just a raccoon rummaging in the trash cans across the street. False alarm. I smiled a little, took a sip of tea. The world kept turning. So did I. And for the first time in a long time, I felt ready for whatever came next. Not because everything was fixed, not because the scars were gone, but because I'd finally learned how to guard my own door. And no one, family or not, was walking through it again without my say-so.